Rips it out. Pow. Yes.
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for May the 6th. This is episode number 2000. We made it. This is actually my first show of the week. Monday and Tuesday, dealing with puppy and health issues. Some of those things you just got to do as you get older, and then some puppy issues that I was not expecting until a little bit later. But at any rate, this is kind of a benchmark show number 2000, the 2000th episode of this podcast from the day J.C. Sherbert and I started in 2016, the summer of 2016, just before the Will Muschamp era began. We've seen a lot. There's nobody I would rather have as my guest on episode number 2000 than the Dean of Gamecock Baseball and men's basketball coverage, John Whittle. He will join us in just a couple of minutes. But today's show, as always, brought to you by the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area, Nana's Porch. Nana's Porch is your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a rehearsal dinner, a birthday, wedding, anniversary, graduation, or engagement celebration. Whatever your event and your catering needs, Nana's Porch has got you covered. So go to the homepage, nanasporch.com, NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Tell him Keith Alsep at Gamecock Pod and Gamecock Pod Live sent you. And they will work with you. They will customize a delicious menu for your event. The customer service is unparalleled. Wedding season is here. College graduation season is here. So go to nanasporch.com. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne. Call him today before it's too late for your catering needs. All right, a couple of news items as we bring in the incomparable John Whittle from a very scenic backyard in the greater Columbia area. John, softball shut out yesterday by Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, 2-0, swept by Alabama. They dropped to 30-27 on the season. Baseball 22-27. Both of these programs are 7-17 in the SEC. The Gamecocks will play host to Alabama, 19th in the nation, beginning on Friday. And just not the kind of season for sure we hope for in year two from Ashley Chastain and her staff. But first, welcome back into the show, my friend. It's not like you've had very much to do to, get ready for this in the last couple of weeks, but we're just glad you had some time to spend with us.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly glad to be here. It's been a busy week, busy couple of weeks, I guess, but always happy to come on here and talk with you.
All right, so let's get into it. Let's talk about we'll start with softball for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll really dive into men's basketball and baseball. Your thoughts? I know you were at the softball series at Alabama. After being one pitch away from the College World Series last year, certainly there were high expectations, kind of like in football, after almost making the college football playoff in 24. Obviously, 25 did not turn out the best for Shane Beamer. And if you had to diagnose, what's been the issues for the softball program?
Well, first, before we get started, I gotta mention to everybody, I've got electric work being done inside, and so I'm not able to be in the office. And then I come out here, and one of the neighbors is having their yard done, so it's either electrician sounds or perhaps some weed eaters and so forth. So the birds are going right now, so that's okay. But there's going to be some background noise today probably, so I apologize for that. And the dogs that doesn't like the weed eater. So, but to your question about softball, I think there have been a couple of problems for this team. You know, I think first of all, it's been mainly, I'm going to tell my dog to. I think it's mainly been because of some defensive problems and some offensive problems. I think it's been mainly a position player issue, in my opinion. Now, that being said, Jory Hurd has not had much help on the mound until recently in Emma Friedel. But I think overall South Carolina has pitched better than what their record should probably indicate. I think, and I'm not trying to call anybody out specifically, but you look back at what some of South Carolina's returning players did last year and how they've performed this year from an offensive standpoint, doesn't line up. Lexi Winters has taken a big step back offensively. She's been phenomenal defensively. She hadn't taken her bat out to the field with her, as they like to say. You know, when you struggle at the plate, sometimes you struggle in the field. We're seeing that some with baseball, but she's been phenomenal defensively. She just hasn't been great offensively, not like last year. Ariana Rhodey, she hasn't been as good this year offensively as she's been last year, or as she was last year. She hadn't been bad, and she's been better, you know, kind of in the last month, but she hasn't been as good. And those two were ones who were, you know, right there in the middle of your order last year, you know, stirring the drink offensively. And, you know, that's a big deal. They've had problems defensively on the left side of the infield, and that's just so important in softball. And, you know, they've done the carousel over there at third base. Played three different players over there at different times. They haven't tried much different at shortstop. You know, they've got a first year starter over there in Shay Anderson, and she's had some good moments, but she's had some challenging moments. And, you know, it just hadn't been quite good enough defensively on that side of the field. It hadn't been quite good enough offensively. And they've played one just hellacious schedule this year. Like when you're in softball, you have 8 SEC series instead of 10 as in baseball. And, you know, so there's a lot of teams that you're not playing. And the teams that South Carolina didn't play, those were the ones that are at the bottom of the standings, you know, with them. You know, Missouri was down there at the bottom, and South Carolina got to play them. But you look at the top of the rankings, and South Carolina played them all. So, you know, that's been kind of the biggest difference this year versus last year. You've had a team that's not been very good defensively. You've got a team, and they haven't been horrible. They just haven't been good enough. And you have a team that's struggled offensively, and then you put that together with what has to be the toughest schedule in the SEC, and you know that's where you are right now. But to that being said, they're also 25th in the RPI, and they are going to make it into the NCAA tournament. They've been playing pretty good ball. Like they were with Alabama tit for tat in that series. You know, they played a poor game yesterday and were eliminated. Poor game offensively. But they've been playing largely pretty good ball down the stretch. So, you know, I think they have a chance to make a little noise in the regional. Certainly not calling a win. I mean, we don't even know where they're going. But they've got a chance to make a little bit of noise there.
I think probably the best news or thing that could happen for this team is getting out of the SEC, maybe getting in a regional with a team from a different league that's not at the top of the standings. But they also went from last year largely flying under the radar, having the kind of season that they had to kind of, this year they're probably getting everybody's best shot. But I mean, the league is, I mean, there are several teams in that league that get everybody's shot just because of all the top 10 programs in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element of truth to that. I mean, last year you went into the season and, South Carolina was the little team that everybody beats up on and going into last year. And, South Carolina shows up and they talk about how hard they play. And, the coach pats South Carolina on the head and like, it's so great for you to be here. Well, as the season went on, like that's not the way it was. They started beating these teams left and right. And, they're getting a much more dedicated look, I guess, and much more intense look from other teams. And, but you look at what SEC softball is and more than half the conferences ranked. I mean, South Carolina's still ranked. I mean, they're 7-17, right, in the league and they're still ranked. So like that tells you what SEC softball is. I mean, we talk about dominance in SEC and in some sports, but it's really that way with softball, really more than anything. That doesn't mean there's a national champion every year. But when you look at the teams, especially after they added Oklahoma and Texas into the league, like they're good teams across the country, but the whole conference in the SEC is really good.
Yeah, I was going to say, after adding Texas and Oklahoma, I think having a national champion every year may not be much of a stretch.
Well, it may not be much of a stretch. I mean, you're exactly right.
All right, good stuff there. All right, so I kind of compared their first season to South Carolina's 24 season. I'm not going to ask you to go into any great detail, but just in general, after a 4-8 season and an abysmal offensive showing, what do you like most about what Shane Beamer has done to remake the staff and overall the program since the end of that season?
Yeah, I mean, you said it right there. It's like everything about last season was not everything, but almost everything about last season was below expectation, especially when you look at the offensive side of the ball. So what did they do? They flipped the offensive side of the ball. They brought in a new coordinator, new offensive line coach, new running back coach. And I mean, those are big deals. You brought in new personnel. You bring back Lenora Sellers, who didn't have a great season, but he's been phenomenal before, and hopefully with the right quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator, he can be phenomenal again, right? So you've made changes. You overhauled the personnel, especially on the offensive line, and I wrote a story that I know some folks over there in the offices didn't like after the season about how to build the Great Wall of Carolina, you've got to tear it down to its studs. And, that's what they did. And you brought in a new coach, basically not completely, but basically the entire staff working on the offensive line is turned over. You've got a slew of new players in there. And, Shed Surratt's back and Josiah Thompson's sort of back. Nolan Hay, who was in and out due to injury and played okay when he was in there, he's back. But basically everybody else is different, and that had to happen. And you lost some good players in there, right? Like there are a few good players, a few highly rated guys who maybe aren't that good, or maybe just couldn't be developed, or for whatever reason weren't living up to their expectations. Sometimes you just need a change of scenery, and if you bring some of those guys back and, maybe they develop here, but, maybe they're a roadblock to other guys. Sometimes everybody just needs to start fresh. And it may not be Case and Henry's fault. And it may not be Tree Babalade's fault and whoever else, Trovon Ball. It may not be those guys' fault. But you know what? You're probably going to be better off someplace else. We're probably going to be better off someplace else. Sometimes you just have to part, and that's what happened. And I think that that's a great thing. To me, that's the biggest thing that happened this offseason was the coaching changes on the offensive side of the ball, plus the complete overhaul of the offensive line. I think South Carolina is going to have a better chance now just because of those two things. If those are the only two things you changed, which they weren't, but if those are the only two things that you change, I'm still optimistic about the potential more so than where they came from.
John, can you ever remember a time when South Carolina had 9 scholarship defensive tackles?
No, not unless you went back into the Lou Holtz days and when they started moving some offensive line. Well, I guess it was mainly defensive line over to offensive line. there were some times where it felt like those guys were being moved back and forth all the time. But no, nothing like this in terms of depth and quality. I asked Shane Beamer recently at the Gamecock Club's tour stop in Spartanburg. I said, where are you most comfortable from a depth standpoint? And where are you most uncomfortable? And he pointed out the defensive tackle, the interior defensive line is where he's most comfortable. And I completely agree there. They've got some guys who are productive who are back. They've got some guys who are productive at other places coming in. They're older, they're experienced. They've also got some young guys they're really excited about. You couldn't ask for that room to be in a better place than what it is.
And to have Travian Robertson back as well. And he might have got off to a little slow start. And everybody, just like this past year, there was like a long, long thread about the demise of Dawn Staley's recruiting. And then as we sit here today and look at it, she's probably put together her greatest recruiting class. But Travian Robertson, talk about a term I think Ryan Bartow invented, defensive lineman from North and South Carolina. He called it D-line heaven. Well, Travian Robertson, that's where he's from. He was a highly regarded 4-star defensive lineman from North Carolina. You look at the last 3 high school additions, big Noah Clark, 6'5", 340, who has turned all heads. Aiden Harris out of the Charlotte area, another 4-star guy that at the Navy All-America game, he and Julian Walker were the talk of the defense. And now, last Wednesday, y'all dispatched Alex Jones up there. We had recorded a segment with him for Wednesday because he was going to be on the road. And he goes to 71st Street High School and talks to John Archer, who is one of the, according to 24/7 Sports Composite, a top 100 player and another 4-star defensive tackle. And then after that, he commits to the Gamecocks. Travian Robertson certainly learned how to play from the best. Now it looks like he's recruiting like the best.
Yeah, and a funny little story about Alex being up there. John Archer actually committed to Shane Beamer while Alex was in the room. So that was a pretty neat deal, I know, for him to see. I told Alex, he sent Hale and I a text. I said, Alex, you need to tweet out hashtag welcome home, hashtag raise the roost 27 and just get people talking. But no, it was you're right on Travian. Sometimes it takes a second for folks to get their sea legs, especially when it comes to recruiting in the SEC. And Travian's been a great college football coach for a while and came in from Tulane, which was, one of the best teams in the country. And he came in and he missed on a couple of guys initially, but it is what it is. They were good enough, and he's really started to get it going, both from a portal and a high school standpoint. Like, some are good at one and not the other. He's been phenomenal at both here lately.
No doubt about it. All right, so let's go to. Well, I did want to ask. Somebody in the chat. Good morning from Italy. Well,
I love it. Never been there.
I spent 10 days there. It was amazing. I'm blanking on even how to say good morning in Italian, but welcome in from Italy. I just know there's the 3 P's. There's pastry, pasta, and pizza. Those are the 3 P's in Italy. All right, so let's go to men's basketball. Obviously, Lamont Paris came in, got through that first season with G.G. Jackson, and other than that, the rest of the roster was completely remade. But then 23-24, they go 26-8, 13-5 in SEC play for the first time since Frank Martin's Final Four run in 2016-17. They made the NCAA tournament. A lot of hope, a lot of older guys that they had brought in from the portal. Talon Cooper, BJ Mack, their eligibility was up. Michi Johnson, for whatever reason, decided to go back to Ohio State. And boy, did they miss him in 24-25, all those close games. I just have to think Michi would have made a difference. But 12-20, 2-16 this year, 13-19, 4-14 in the SEC. Like a lot of programs, mass exodus. 6. Now, before we get to that, staff reshuffling. 2 full-time assistants gone. They add a personnel / capologist / GM type from the WNBA, the Charlotte Hornets. They add Bob Donwall Jr., who spent 6 years with Chris Beard, but a lot of NBA experience and foreign experience there. Your thoughts on just the coaching moves that Lamont Paris has made?
I think that Eddie was losing Eddie Shannon. I think, I don't want to call him a scapegoat, but in some ways, I think Eddie did a good job. Will Bailey is, I just don't think really fit very well, to be 100% honest with you. It didn't work the first time, didn't work the second time. He's headed back home to Chicago. Bob Dunwald, I mean, I really like the guy. He brings a wealth of various basketball knowledge. Like, he doesn't just bring some SEC experience. He doesn't just bring some basketball experience. He doesn't just bring some overseas experience or major college basketball or NCAA tournament or whatever else. He brings it all. He brings, I mean, the guy speaks Russian. I mean, he's got a lot of tools in his toolbox, so to speak, in terms of where he can go. And when you look at having that international experience, it's one thing to go out there and recruit international players from various countries or wherever, but you've got to have a sense of the kind of competition that they're going against too. And, he knows the good leagues. Like, I mean, if you can go average 25 points in one league and, that not be as good as averaging, 13 in another. And, he's just got his depth of knowledge because of all of his experience over multiple continents too. Like, not just one place overseas, like multiple continents. Like it just it's just really going to help South Carolina, and for various reasons. And like, when you're South Carolina and where you are right now, you can't just go pick out whoever you want from the transfer portal. Like, you've got to be a little bit more resourceful. You're probably going to have to go get a couple or few international guys. You're probably going to have to find some guys who, might need to reclassify up or something like that. Like, there's different things. There's different bushes that you've got to go shake and different rocks to look under. And I think he can really help do that. So really like that hire. As far as Duquette from Charlotte, like, I mean, I think he's been helpful in some ways. I don't know that he's come in to have I don't know that he's come in to have his fingerprints on the recruiting class maybe as much as was sort of anticipated. He's a basketball guy and had been in various roles with the Hornets. And, I think he is going to be helpful over the course of time when it comes to looking at all aspects of the program. And, he's not going to be the guy who's going out there and, identifying every player and interacting with them. In fact, he really did none of that, during what is currently this portal class. So, I think it certainly helps from an optics standpoint, and I think it will help a little bit from a basketball standpoint right now, but I think it'll help more over time. And it's more of a consulting role than a full-time staff role. I mean, he doesn't have an office over there at Colonial Life Arena or in the basketball offices. Like, he is more of a consulting role than anything else. And we'll see what it evolves into. I talked with a couple of folks over within the administration who said, we don't know exactly what he's going to be doing all the time. We just know that he has a variety of different skills and expertise, and we're going to see how it evolves as it goes along. So I don't know if I missed on anybody in particular, but, I will say, South Carolina still has an assistant coach hire to make, and I haven't heard any kind of update on that here lately. But, Kerry Rich has moved into more of a typical assistant coach type of role right now. And I think it will kind of continue along. I mean, you can have more assistant coaches now, as of a couple of years ago than what South Carolina has had. When it comes to recruiting, he's been a little bit more of a facilitator and kind of a helper between what you would traditionally call your assistant coaches. And, now he's, instead of facilitating and kind of handing off, like, he's the guy who's going and doing the in-homes, and he's going out and doing the scouting. And, he looks more like a traditional assistant coach right now. So, but they're still adding another assistant coach here at some point. And I don't know whether it'll be the next 5 days or 10 days or how long it's going to take. But, I'll try to get an update on that here pretty soon. But, that's kind of the off-season evolution of the basketball program. And, they've certainly got a lot more money in there and have spent a lot more money. And I like some things about this basketball roster, probably more so than most. I'm assuming we'll talk about that here soon. But, I think they've done I won't say they've killed the portal, but at the same time, when you're, at the bottom of the SEC for 2 years in a row, it's hard to kill it in the portal because, teams want to know that they're going to have a chance to compete for the NCAA tournament. And it's hard to see that, when you've been at the bottom or near the bottom of the league for for 2 straight years. So that makes it a much bigger challenge. But I think, especially considering, what they have to work with from a things to sell standpoint, I think they've done a pretty decent job.
All right, so I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but when the first two, we kind of knew, so Shannon was out, everybody kind of knew Will Bailey was going to be moving on. Why weren't these moves made prior to the transfer portal opening? I mean, to me, to quote my dad, who's been gone now over 14 years, they just did it bass backwards, and they still. So when Eddie Shannon left, when Will Bailey left, I'm like, okay, well, Earl Grant needs a job. Steve Smith needs a job. I'm sure Rod Terry, who's one of my guys, he'd probably leave the SEC studios to get back in it. And I thought all of those guys could really help Lamont Paris, particularly when it came to recruiting. And Donwald, he was hired at the very end of the portal. And it's like they just went through it with Tanner Bronson, Kerry Rich, and Lamont Paris. I'm just wondering, do you have any insight on why you wouldn't? It seems to me like I would ramp up, get my guys, because maybe at their former place, they got a guy or two they can pluck. And that's just not the way it went.
Yeah, well, Keith, I'll keep it short with you. I don't have a damn clue. I don't. I mean, I don't know. I wish I could articulate an answer for you. And I wish that I had been able to go down to the Charleston Gamecock Club meeting the other day and talk with Lamont and ask him that question, because it's something that he needs to answer. Why did it take so long? I mean, it was several weeks, in between his season ending and moves being made, and you knew you had this stuff coming up. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, Eddie and the coaches knew that they were leaving Eddie and Will long before either one were ever reported. And I guess there's no real sense in announcing that they're leaving if you don't have other guys lined up. So I understand that part of it, right? Like if you have a job, if you're Will Bailey and you're Eddie Shannon, if you have a job, it's easier to go get another job than it is if you've been fired, right? So why announce that you're out if it doesn't make that much of a difference one way or the other? But you need to go out and get other coaches, and they weren't able to do that. So the timing of the firings or departures or whatever, I kind of understand that. But the fact that you couldn't bring in somebody else, earlier than you did, really disappointing. And to make a move from a front office standpoint sooner than you did, really disappointing. Because we all knew this was coming. We knew that if Lamont was coming back, we knew that it was coming, that it wasn't going to be run it back again. And I mean, we sat there for a really long time waiting on something to happen, and nothing really ever did. And as you said, you're still down an assistant coach, and the portal's done now. Like, I would have liked to have had Dunwald or whoever come in, a week before the portal opened. He got in a few days after it opened. So he was able to go through a lot of it. I mean, a couple of the big visitors that they had in, like, he was around for. So like South Carolina wasn't real deep in the weeds in terms of, in terms of how far along they were, but it would have been nice to have somebody in and preparing and positioning guys. I mean, that seems quite obvious, but it didn't happen. So I think at some point Lamont's going to have to answer why things took so long, and I'm sure the answer is probably going to be that they were looking for the right fit, and the platitudes like that. But he's gonna have to answer that at some point. And I don't know how much that would have affected exactly what South Carolina did in the portal. Does it make a difference with the SMU centers, Sumet, however you say it? I don't know. Does it make a difference with Rowan Brumgarner or Brumball? No, probably not, because Dunwald was here, already had a little bit of a relationship with him. Does it help bring in some other players that we didn't even know about that he would have been recruiting? I don't know. But it certainly didn't look good from an optics standpoint. And I said when there was nothing going on, when you thought something should be going on and nothing was going on, I said, there's no sense in judging it now. Let's just judge it at the end. And we're getting close to the end. There are a couple of international guys out there that, they're going to add who should be real contributors to the team next year. And, once we know who those guys are, that'll be pretty much it in terms of like your meaningful roster additions. And then once we see those and kind of take a look at the whole picture, then we can give it a pretty good evaluation. But it certainly didn't start out great, and it certainly didn't look great from an optics standpoint. It's been a bumpy road, but they've navigated it okay. I think they've navigated things okay.
So as we turn the page on this, I mean, there are 6 transfer portal additions. I think there's a lot to like there, but I also think there are still holes in the roster. Just give me 2 or 3 names of the guys that you like the most there.
Well, what I'm going to do instead, I'm not going to answer your question. I'm going to tell you something that I like about each of them, because I think all of them are really good pieces. And the thing I like about this class the most is I think the pieces fit together a little bit better, or a lot better than last year's pieces. First, I think they're more talented, but you can see a rhyme and reason why all of these folks were added. And I think that's a big deal. And when you look at last year's class, to me, as we were sitting there last year, like I didn't feel like it really fit together great. But I do like what they've done here. I mean, I personally like a more traditional pass first point guard, and that was what we had with when we saw Talon Cooper out there, and that's not really what is on this roster. But I think Corey Mincy, who plays the game a lot like Michi, I think he can be really good. I mean, he scores and shoots at a high clip, and I'll say this too. 2 things that they really needed to address from last year that I think that they've done a great job in doing is they had to get better shooters, and they did. Like they talked about last year's team being a great shooting team. I still don't know why, because the players that they brought in weren't great shooters. They just weren't, and never really were. These guys are. Like Corey Mincy was shooting phenomenally, over 40% when he got hurt. For over 40% from 3 when he hurt his thumb. Dropped a little bit after that, but still a very good shooter. Camden Heide had the highest 3-point percentage of anybody in the SEC, 14th nationally, ninth best out of any player, in the country with more than 100 attempts. I like the Wisconsin big, Alexis Bilauskas. I've got to be sure I'm saying his name right at some point, but I really like him just because, he is kind of in the mold of what Lamont Paris really likes. He's Lithuanian national U20 guy and put up some big numbers in big games there. He kept getting better as the year went along at Wisconsin. Like his trajectory is straight through the air. Shane Blakeney, a wing guard 2-3 type of guy who can shoot, athleticism, but tremendous defensively. And South Carolina's got to get better. That's the other point I wanted to make from. You needed to get much better shooters in there, but you needed to get much tougher. You needed to get much more physical. And, Lamont's first 3 years, to include the bad years, and in addition to the good years, his teams always played hard, always played tough, always played physical, like almost always. Everybody's got a game. But that was some of the best traits of those teams. And last year's team was just soft as baby poop. I mean, those guys were not very good. They were not very tough. They were not very physical. They were not very strong. They did not always play with great effort. So, that was something that really needed to be addressed. I think that's been addressed in spades with some of these guys. So, that's kind of where I am. Davion Hannah's the guy with the highest ceiling that I think is the most unproven, and I don't know that you worry about his injury and that kind of deal, but you wonder, how good he's going to be. But I really think that the pieces they've added so far have been good, and really want to see what they've got coming in. They're both going to be guys on the big side and not the guard side. So we'll take that as it comes.
So my concern is still lack of athleticism in the front court. Like, I'm with you. I think all these guys, they fit together. I think they're upgrades. I don't know so much about Jacob. I mean, I've coached several Eastern European players, but none from the Czech Republic. So I don't know if it's Nisus. I don't know on him. Biliauskas, who is from Lithuania, I actually had a player from his hometown in my prep school program. It's a long time ago. But there's certainly a lot to like about him and all of these guys. I don't know, is it Hyde? Great shooter, no doubt. How long can he stay on the floor defensively? Foul prone, not a plus defender. I guess those would be my concerns, but this is a huge season for Lamont Paris, and they, 4-14 again, which I don't think they'll be that, but I mean this is, I think this is it for him. It's either going to be, well, you got it right, you're back, or we're moving on. Do you think that could be a fair assessment?
Yeah. So your stance is he'll either be back next year or he won't. Well, I'd agree with that. No, I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm with you. Is probably NCAA tournament or bust if I'm guessing. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's the point you're getting at, and I think that's probably right. I don't know that for sure, but to your point, like, basically anybody that South Carolina is going to be able to bring in is going to have a shortfall. Like, if South Carolina's not getting a perfect player out there, they're not going to get the big that is running up and down the court, blocking all the shots, knocking down a 3-pointer, they're just not. Like, they're just not. And it's not even because of just a money thing. It's because, again, you have been last or near last in the SEC each of the last 2 years. Like, you're having to overpay for some guys, and there's going to be some flaws there. Like, yeah, Camden Heide isn't the best defender. I mean, you're going to have other guys who are good defenders who pick up the slack for him a little bit, but he's going to knock down a three for you. Like he just is. And you look at that Texas team last year, I get that he averaged 5 points a game. You look at that Texas team, they had 3 guards on that team that were ranked in the top 25 in the SEC in total number of shots. There's 16 teams in the league. You have 3 guys in the top 25 in amount of shots taken. That means those 3 guys, and one of them isn't even that big center, Volatoris, or however you say his name. That's not even one of those guys. They had 3 guards taking top 25 shots in the league. How's this guy supposed to get shots up? I
agree. I watched him play a bunch.
And with him, with South Carolina, what have been their flaws the last 2 years from a shooting standpoint? They're missing shots. They're getting open looks, but they're missing shots. You get Camden Heide an open look, guess what? He's probably going to hit the shot. He's shooting 45% from 3. South Carolina's 3-point shooters were shooting 30% from 3. That's a big difference.
No doubt.
So, yeah, so you've got to take some chances on some people. You've got to take some guys who are a little bit flawed, and you've got to accentuate their strengths and try to mask their weaknesses as best as possible. The kid's got some athleticism. I'm sure you saw that follow-up dunk he had in the championship game at Purdue as a freshman. That was insane. That looked like Keyshawn Bryant flying through the air. There's some athleticism in there for that guy, and he can knock down the three. We'll see how it goes. I'm not saying this is a perfect SEC basketball roster, because it's not, but I think it's coming together a lot better than the folks out there on the message boards are claiming. And we'll see what these next couple of international pieces look like, but I think they're in a decent spot.
All right, so good stuff.
And we've got a little bit more time to talk about baseball. We can go until about 11.
Okay, all right. Because I was trying to
I keep running my mouth.
We had discussed.
Yeah, I keep running my mouth. You said briefly, I don't want to dive too deep down into this about a question a couple of minutes ago, and I rattled on for about 5. But we can keep on rolling until about 11.
Look, we love to hear the dean expound upon topics. That's why I asked the questions. I want your unvarnished takes, and that's what we're getting. So I'm just trying to keep to the timeline we agreed upon, but I'm happy to dive into baseball. And so just as a preamble, from 2010, for 3 years straight, South Carolina won back-to-back national championships. They played for it 3 years in a row. Then Chad Holbrook's first year, you're sitting in Chapel Hill in a super regional where if they don't just kick the ball around the yard all game long, they would have been back in Omaha again. And then it doesn't work out with him. Mark Kingston comes in. Ray tried to play the long game with Kevin O'Sullivan. Florida won the national championship. He could be out of a job if he's not already. I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with it. So you got Mark Kingston. Kingston ultimately did not work out for a myriad of reasons. Honestly, I thought when Paul Maneri got hired that Ray had pulled a rabbit out of the hat, but it turned out to be an utter and complete disaster. I know you've discussed this on Southeastern 16. I enjoyed that. How do you wrap your head from being in Omaha 3 years in a row and then in Chapel Hill thinking, well, we're getting ready to go back for the 4th straight year, to now this program, the tradition throughout all head coaches up until recently has been unbelievable. And now it's, I guess, to quote Lou Holtz, when you're at rock bottom, you got two choices. You stay there or you dust yourself off and get up and start climbing back up. Obviously, the season is not over yet. Two more series, the tournament, which may or may not be short-lived, and then a baseball search, which Jeremiah Donati is already doing his homework on. We've always been able to count on baseball when football and basketball were bad, but not lately. And I'll just hand it to you.
Yeah, I mean it's been disappointing, and instead of going back to Holbrook and Kingston too much, I'll just say that I thought that the Paul Maneri hire was a really good one. I mean, and I've got to wear that.
Me too.
I thought the biggest weakness from the Kingston era, at the end of the Kingston era, was just kind of a lack of accountability within the program. I felt like there wasn't enough structure, which I think college athletes need, even though sometimes they don't want. I think it was more of a professional type environment where players just kind of show up and get their work in and they hold themselves accountable. And that's not really the way you need to operate in college athletics. There needs to be more structure and accountability than that. And, I thought Paul Maneri would bring that in, and I wasn't so worried about the retirement and the changes in terms of NIL and roster management and how all that works. Cause he's bullish on Terry Rooney as a recruiter and being the best in the business at that. And, he hasn't been out of the game. He was at LSU for a year. He was in an off-field role, but still at LSU in some capacity in a great program. He was in college before that at Purdue. I mean, he never left college game. And, Monty has been right there at South Carolina and in the trenches and doing that. So I didn't feel like the perceived weaknesses of Paul were all that big of a deal. It turns out I couldn't have been more wrong in terms of anything that I thought about that. And that's what's most disappointing is it wasn't accountability and structure. It was intimidation and fear that he was trying to instill in players, and it's just not going to work. It's just not going to work. And Rooney the same way. So it's just, and then, they had a ton of money both seasons really to go out and spend in the portal, and they just didn't bring in good players this past year, or good enough players, SEC quality players. Like, these aren't bad players. They aren't bad kids. They aren't bad people. It's just not a very good SEC roster. And, I had them missing the tournament before the year, and, obviously some things have happened and hadn't gone their way in any capacity. And, they'll miss the tournament this year unless they win the SEC tournament.
So I was in Las Vegas for March Madness, and that was the Arkansas weekend. And after the first game, you broke it. You were expecting a change and then a change. All tip of the hat to you, even though I'm not wearing one under my headset. Normally, it does not happen that quickly. I mean, I'm not asking you to go all the way inside, but certainly, a change need to be made. And, to quote the Jeremy Foley, the former Florida athletic director, he said when they got rid of Ron Zook, what will be done eventually must be done immediately. And I guess that's kind of was Jeremiah Donati's thought process after what he had seen and what was going on inside the program. And so there's like been this long runway, which we're still not there. It's like we're not even taxiing yet. We're just kind of maybe a little bit, but we're just stuck on this runway because you still got games to go. But Donati's sitting in there before this plane takes off on this coaching search. He's been able certainly to do a lot of homework, probably back channel with agents. Obviously, Kevin Schnall is the name everybody talks about. I know you've said you think he will listen to South Carolina previously, and I know that's looking at it from the outside looking in, he would make a lot of sense, especially bringing Matt, who I can't think of his last name, the pitching coach, back with him. Matt Williams, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But if it's not him, Justin Parker, Ted Kane at Texas, who played for Paul Maneri, that would really be almost incestuous. Oh, that's Game of Thrones kind of stuff. There's an assistant at Georgia. There's probably other head coaches. I mean, in your mind, I'm not, you're not Jeremiah Donati. I know you have some insight from Scuttlebutt. Who do you think are the names, and kind of outline what you think the guy, the qualities that need to be possessed from the next guy to get Carolina baseball back on track?
Yeah, and let me begin by saying, like, I don't know what direction Jeremiah is going to go in. Like, this is the first real coaching search, and I don't know how exactly he wants to handle it, what he values in terms of a hire. Like, we don't really know that yet. And I don't want to say he's a closed book, but he's not as forward facing as a lot of ADs, and you don't see him much. You don't see him at many games. You don't see him. He doesn't talk very often, and that's fine. But you don't have a real sense, if you're somebody like me, is somebody is closed off as to what they're going to do. So I think we're going to learn a lot about him in the coaching search this year in terms of how he operates and what he likes, what he doesn't, et cetera. I say all that to say, there's a lot of great candidates out there that he can look at, whether they're current head coaches, whether they're assistant coaches. The SEC's had some success here lately of hiring coaches who were assistants, who have come in and been really good. So, if you hire a Nolan Kane from Texas, if you hire a Will Coggin from Georgia, if you hire a Josh Jordan from LSU, that may not seem like an obvious thing to do. You think you're South Carolina, you should be able to go out and hire, one of the top sitting head coaches. Well, maybe you could, but maybe you won't want what these guys have. So I think that Kevin Schnall is probably going to end up being the first call, and see if you can get a deal done there with Coastal or to get him from Coastal. But if not, there's a lot of really good assistants out there too. You throw Justin Parker in that mix, but there are a lot of great head coaches out there as well. Whether it's a Dan Fitzgerald from Kansas or a Steve Sabins from West Virginia. Like, these guys have some experience, leading their programs. Whether it's a James Ramsey from Georgia Tech, or maybe you don't want Will Coggin from Georgia. Maybe you want the head guy. Maybe you want Wes Johnson from Georgia. I was there in Athens for that series, and they're a top 10 team in the country. They've got a park that holds like 3,000 something people, and it's like maybe 2/3 full and beautiful weekend for ball. Like, I mean, maybe you want to go to a place that's got an 8,000 seat stadium and a couple of national championships, and and you've got more financial support in some ways, like, or maybe not. Maybe you want to stay at Georgia. Like, there are a lot of different routes that Jeremiah Donati can go. There's a lot of really good coaches out there who I think will at least entertain the idea of coming to coach at South Carolina. I don't think you're going to have to get very far down the list. It may not feel like an attractive job right now because they haven't won very much here lately, but there's still a lot of great redeeming qualities. And from what I can gather, and I mean, you got to take this somewhat with a grain of salt because very few are going to tell you the opposite. But from what I understand, they're ready and willing to continue to invest at a very high rate in this baseball program. South Carolina, according to a report released a couple of weeks ago, was top 10 in the country in operating budget. They're probably not far from top 10 in NIL, top 15 in NIL budget. Like, there's plenty of resources here, and they're going to continue to invest, and they are going to look for a guy who can use those resources wisely. And instead of just being ranked in the top 10 in operating budget and NIL, so forth, they're going to hope that and they're going to hire the guy that they can believe will put them into the top 10 in the rankings. So, I think that South Carolina is in a pretty decent spot to land a great head coach. They've got plenty of options out there. They've got some great story to sell, and we'll see what direction Jeremiah goes.
Interesting time. So one name not mentioned, just as a point of reference.
Keith, ask your best one. My electrician's right in there, and he's hovering, so I think he needs me. So we'll make this last one your best one.
This is it. So Kirk Saarloos, TCU.
I don't love it. I don't love it, and I don't think it's going to be an option if these next couple of weeks don't go very well for him. I mean, I looked at D1 Baseball's latest regional projections, and TCU was one of the last four in. They made the tournament, made the regional last year, finished decently in their conference, but lost in the regional the year before that. They didn't make the NCAA tournament. So if they don't make it this year, you're going to hire a guy over here with so many great options out there at your disposal. You're going to hire a guy who's missed the NCAA tournament 2 of the last 3 years, and they've put resources into baseball there at TCU, as we all know, and it's a baseball hotbed, Texas is. So, I think that would be, to me, a disappointing hire, unless, they put together something here at the end of this year. Like, you have opportunities these next 2 weeks. I mentioned Sabins and Fitzgerald. TCU plays those teams each of the next 2 weeks, and then their conference tournament, and see where things go. You start playing your best baseball at the end of the year. I mean, that's a trait that you like in a coach. Have your team peaking at the right time. So we'll see how that goes as we sit here right now on Wednesday, May 6th at 11:04 a.m. my time, 10:04 a.m. your time. I don't really think that that's the best way for South Carolina to go. I think there's too many other good coaches out there who are very likely to take this job, who have some better things on their resume than what I'd like to see.
John, great stuff. Go handle your electrician. All the best with the home improvements and everything with that. I just can't thank you enough for spending so much time with us today. And I fully believe you will own this coaching search on the internet and within the Gamecock online communities, and I'm here for it. I can't wait until the season is over, but then you got to go through NCAA tournament, and a lot of these guys are going to be in the NCAA tournament. I mean, this thing may not get done until June sometime.
Yeah, you're right. And we'll see how all that kind of plays out. And, I do want to say I appreciate the folks who have stayed on board at Gamecock 247 with us. We're basically still the same as we were, a week ago. Tony Morrell announced that he was retiring and leaving the business altogether, and he left. And apart from that, the only thing that's changed is the name of the site. And, Alex and I, Hale, Ryan Bethea, best photographer in the market. We're all still there. All of our members are still there. The platform is still there. 24/7 Sports is still there. There's no merger. I mean, it's just no two ways about it. So we appreciate the folks who are staying involved and engaged at Gamecock 247, and we look forward to certainly continuing to serve those members. We've had very few cancels, and we've had a few people sign up, and we're going to keep rocking and rolling. But don't type the Big Spur into your web browser. Come to South Carolina's 24/7 Sports page, Gamecock247.com. You can put in Gamecocks247.com if you want. But that's where we are. That's where we continue to be, and we'll keep rocking and rolling.
Three of the best in the business, hardest working, and know this market better than anybody. John Whittle, Hale McGranahan, and the pride of Hampton County, Alex Jones. Three grinders, man. Y'all just get it done. And that's where I open when I get on the internet. That's the first place I go every single day.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Keith. I appreciate you having me on. We'll talk soon.
You got it, John. Thank you. Take care. That was John Whittle from 24/7 Sports, now Gamecock 247 at 24/7 Gamecocks on the socials. Great stuff. So last week, Michael Sauls was my second guest. We knew something was going to happen with women's basketball. It did not happen until after the show. It did not happen until I was on the road to Dallas. And, Dawn Staley was like, well, 12, 13, that's about it for us with NIL, etc. And now she's got 15 players on her roster. My man that used to be the head coach at Arkansas, he was I believe it's Mike Neighbors. He was with the SEC network this past year. Now he's back in the WNBA as an assistant coach. One of the people I always respected most from X's and O's. I don't really think Arkansas did a whole lot to support his program there. I don't know that his style, like Joe Mazzulla at the Boston Celtics or Kim Caldwell at Tennessee, I just don't know that those systems live by the three, die by the three. Well, at Lamont Paris' team this year, I mean, you don't need shot takers, you need shot makers. And Dawn Staley certainly added another one from France. But my Mike Neighbors quote is this, is international players are going to become more prominent, and you don't need to, if you're going to have one, you better have two or three. So Dawn Staley, what does she do? You got Allie Turnabees, who is a unicorn, 6'7". She came in mid-year, January the 1st. She gets thrown into it, had some good games, but man, you can really see the potential. Her mom's a WNBA Hall of Famer. You know, she could have easily redshirted and had 4 years. Dawn Staley wanted to go ahead and play her. And you can see the tools. Well, they add one of her running mates from the French national team, and Justine Lobens, a 6'1" lefty wing player who in FIBA average shot 53% from three. Okay, 53% from three. She's not like Jordan Lee. Okay, I don't even know she's got the athleticism of Tessa Johnson, but she's a lefty. She's very crafty. She loves the corner three. She hits from the wing, from the top, in the mid-range, at the basket. Left-handed players are just harder to guard for some reason. And Justine Lobens, you throw on the film, she's just really crafty. She's got size. She uses her size, but she is really a knockdown shooter. She is now the 15th player on the roster, 6 newcomers in this recruiting class, with obviously the late additions, the big O, Olivia Edwards, 6'5". Jersey Robinson, that's 2 consensus top 5 players. Okay, Kaylee Wynn, a 6'2" wing, stretch 4 from California. 2 players from California, 3 from the West Coast, and if you add Jordan Lee, that's 3 players from California coming in to South Carolina. Kelsey Andrews, a big-bodied post player. I mentioned Jersey Robinson, and really you could throw in, along with Justine Lobens, why don't you Shane Laughlin at ESPN, I found it laughable, Laughlin, Lafable, laughable, that Laughlin picked Southern Cal with the number 1 class in the country. Yeah, they got Sanaa Hall, they added Sarah Akiki, and then they got Satya Fagan, who sat out at 6'4". Well, in the first iteration of ESPN's class ranking, South Carolina was number 4. And they're like, well, you got Allie Turnabees is really the gem of the class. But then you add Jersey Robinson and Olivia Edwards, 2 top 5 consensus players, okay? ESPN, which is in the state of Connecticut, by the way, the only ranking that did not have Jersey Robinson in the top 5, and the only rankings that that had Olivia Vicosa ranked ahead of Olivia Edwards. Like, I don't understand why South Carolina is not number 1. I mean, to me, it's laughable, that class with, you had Allie Turnabees at 6'7", Olivia Edwards 6'5", Kelsey Andrews almost about basically 6'5". She was one of the top 2 bigs in this class. Kaylee Wynn missed her senior year in high school, but she's a phenomenal player, shooter, basketball savvy. Okay, you got 6 newcomers. Dawn Staley. All right. over a decade of dominance, she has elevated, and belated happy birthday, Coach Staley. She had her born day on Monday, May the 4th. And I think we have to recognize her greatness, which is unparalleled at South Carolina or basically anywhere else, because other than UConn. Dawn Staley in 2008 took over a program in shambles. There were probably as many people sitting on the benches and behind the benches than were in the stands. And now, for over a decade, you've led the NCAA in attendance. She's had 9 30-win seasons, 3 national championships, 7 Final Four, 6 consecutive Final Four appearances, something Pat Summitt did not do. 10 of the last 13 years, South Carolina has won the SEC regular season. 9 times they've won the SEC tournament, which not even Pat Summitt did. You look really since 2015, South Carolina went 34-3, went to their first Final Four. Asia Wilson was a freshman. Sophomore year 2015-2016, South Carolina was 33-1. The one was to UConn. They didn't really like where they got sent in the tournament, and they couldn't make a shot against Syracuse. They got upset. They could have won a national championship. 2017, they did get over that hump. Asia Wilson, her roommate, Alicia Gray, Bianca Cuevas, Ty Moore, Mad Kiki, Herbert Harrigan off the bench, Kayla Davis. They won it all. The next year, without Davis and Gray, who said they were going to stay, and I can't blame them for leaving, especially Alicia Gray, who was the number 2 pick in the WNBA Rookie of the Year. They went to the Elite 8, and Asia Wilson battled vertigo, which I certainly know what that's like. Really, one down year. That was after Asia left. But then you bring in the freshies. 32-1, 16-0. The number 1 overall seed. You breeze through the SEC tournament like a hot knife through butter. You're probably going to win a national championship, and COVID hits. The next year, in a COVID-shortened season, South Carolina started that run of 6 straight Final Fours. 2 missed layups in the last 3 seconds against Stanford. I was there in San Antonio, or they would have won that national championship. The next year they did win the national championship, 35-2, 15-1 in the SEC. They beat UConn rather handily, by the way. In Minneapolis, Paige Becker's home state, in front of a young, up-and-coming young lady with a beautiful smile and personality, and was the best three-point shooter in the country this year, Tessa Johnson. The next year, you're 36-0. You're back in Dallas where you won your first national championship. And essentially, the refs just absolutely robbed you in that Iowa game. They beat the snot out of Aaliyah Boston, way worse than Stanford did Asia Wilson in the national semifinals. Completely took her off the floor, off the board. And then the next year, I mean, they won 74 out of 75 games, 2 undefeated runs to the Final Four in a row. And then they won the national championship, putting a beat down on Iowa and Caitlin Clark. And Raven Johnson absolutely shut her down. The next year, they make it the national championship game. They get beat by UConn and what was Gino's best team since Stewart played. Breanna Stewart, they won 4 straight. This past year, Chloe Kitts and Ashlyn Watkins go down. You don't have those 2 players who most likely would have been starters, an all-SEC player and a 6'4" jumping being of an athlete that was a rebounding machine, rim protector, dunker, in Ashlyn Watkins. She had over the only underclassman in the history of NCAA to have 20 or more rebounds in a Final Four game. But in spite of all of that, they went 36-3. They won the SEC regular season crown. They got upset by Oklahoma. Then they didn't lose another game until the SEC championship game to Texas, who they lost on a buzzer beater on Thanksgiving night. And they beat UConn. They beat the brakes off of them. And Gino Auriemma, we all know what went on. But I don't really want to focus. You know what? I'm not even going to talk about this latest lame attempt until I just mention the fact that Dawn Staley, since 2013, she's not finished lower than second in the SEC, and she's won it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. Finished second 3 times. Won 9 SEC tournament championships. Not even Pat Summitt did that. 6 straight Final Fours and counting. And now, belated happy birthday to Coach Staley, who quite simply, no other coach in the history of the University of South Carolina has sustained success and brought a program to rise like the phoenix out of the ashes like what Dawn Staley has done. I mean, only Gino Auriemma has been to 6 or more consecutive Final Fours. Pat Summitt did not win 9 SEC tournament championships. Dawn Staley set the record for consecutive SEC wins, consecutive tournament wins, which I think was maybe 6 straight. What she's done has been nothing short of extraordinary. And there was a post on the Big Spur back in September about, well, all this talk about Dawn Staley going to the WNBA, taking the Knicks job. It's really killing us in recruiting. The recruiting has gone downhill steadily, blah, 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 blah. Well, she ends up with arguably the number 1 recruiting class in the country. You're going to have 10 McDonald's All-Americans on your team next year. You add Jordan Lee, who was a top 10 player. You bring back Tessa Johnson, Agot McKeer, Joyce Edwards, who was an All-American as a sophomore, Chloe Kitts, Ashlyn Watkins, Maddie McDaniel, a McDonald's All-American. You add Jordan Lee, a McDonald's All-American, Jersey Robinson, a McDonald's All-American, Olivia Edwards, a McDonald's All-American. You're going to have 4 players on your team that can dunk, 15 players, 2 French players. Agat McKeer spent a lot of her time in Canada. She was playing better than any freshman in the country at the end of the season. I mean, this roster is so deep and so talented. I don't know how those are great problems to have. But today, Dawn Staley, we celebrate. This is your birthday month, your birthday week. It happened on Monday. And this podcast, certainly, and YouTube show, and this old high school, prep school, and college basketball coach recognizes and salutes the sustained success that Dawn Staley and her staff, which has turned over. She's hired great assistant after great assistant. Nikki McCrae, God bless her family, and I'm sure she is still looking down from heaven, pulling for her Vols, but her friend, her Team USA teammate, Dawn Staley, because she was a big part of laying the foundation and helping bring in all those great players. I mean, South Carolina was winning the SEC with 6'1" post players. Okay. Now they got 6'7" and 6'5" dunkers, two-handed dunkers. What she's done is nothing short of miraculous, and the fans, they get it. I'm not sure the rest of Gamecock Nation gets it. Yeah, you can talk about the last 2 national championship games. I can argue South Carolina maybe didn't even belong there. But they got there anyway. And the depth was not what they thought they would have. I thought it clearly, the lack of depth, the starters played more minutes this year than at any time in this decade because they had to. Yes, you had talented freshmen, but Gotti was injured. Isla McDowell, another McDonald's All-American, she had multiple games with 3 and 4 threes. Dawn Staley said predictable was the best way to describe her, which is great for a freshman. You know what you're going to get. She's played with Brazil in international play. She is going to do nothing but get better. South Carolina is going to have so many options. There's only one player. Maddie McDaniel has a distinction. She's the only player on this roster that is under 6 foot tall. 14 players. Jordan Lee, I really think, is the only player that's 6 foot. I think even though they may list a couple of them at 6 foot, they're 6'1", and the ones they list at 6'1" are probably 6'2", and the ones that are 6'2", Chloe Kitts is probably 6'3", and the one they list at 6'3" is probably 6'4". And we know Allie's 6'7". Adele Tack, can she bounce back from injury? But Ashlyn Watkins, Olivia Edwards, Chloe Kitts, Kelsey Andrews, so many options in the front court. Jersey Robinson, I don't think South Carolina's ever had a guard like her. She's probably 6'2". She can handle it like a point guard. She can score. She's a brute. She's very physical, and she's only 17. She won't turn 18 until Preseason practice starts in October. That's when her birthday is. She was in Columbia this past weekend as a Nike athlete. Asia Wilson could not be there, but the Wilson family was there at the Foot Locker in Columbia. She did a Q&A there. She had 2 private events. Man, Jersey Robinson is a big freaking deal, okay? And Shane Laughlin, I don't know, maybe you had to drop her because UConn stirs that straw up there, but everybody else has her as a number 2, 3, 4, 5 player in the country. You got her at number 6. I don't understand. And I like Olivia Vicosa, but she is not the big O. Completely different. So much to love, and the future so bright at South Carolina. These last 2 classes will carry this program long after Tessa is gone. I mean, Ashlyn, Chloe, there are already players in place to take their spots, and the demise of Dawn Staley has been greatly exaggerated. Okay. Oh God, we're not getting anybody. To we got everybody. So Dawn Staley, who I've gotten to meet and know, and my daughter, is a much better person than she is even as a basketball coach. But she has become, I mean, I can remember the days, the frustration of losing out on recruits. Hey, you never going to get everybody, but there were some years they finished second for a lot of players. But guess what? They just won anyway. And now everybody they recruit's in the top 20. You're not getting all of them, but look at 2 top 5 and really 4 top 20 recruits, not to mention the international players. And then Jordan Lee, probably the best player in the transfer portal and certainly the best fit at South Carolina. And Dawn Staley and Justin Logan's just a luxury piece. Probably somebody that you can take your time developing, but if you want to spread the floor, somebody's zoning, you can put in players that can absolutely just knock down threes. The days of packing in the paint on South Carolina are over. And post players, the legacy still continues, and so does Dawn Staley's legacy of greatness already. South Carolina now the number 1 preseason pick by ESPN, The Athletic, everybody else after this recruiting class. South Carolina, number 1, did not lose a single player of the transfer portal in a day and age when that's unheard of. And not only that, look at South Carolina's rookies. Raven Johnson, impact immediately. Medina Okot already putting up double-doubles. And Tanaya Latson, considered the steal of the draft in a vote of the WNBA GMs. And the Los Angeles Sparks, Nika Awumake, who's on ESPN, who plays for them, they couldn't believe she was there when they picked at number 18. And she's going to be in the rotation. And there's a bunch of other Gamecocks that are going to be on rosters as well from the Dawn Staley era. South Carolina's had the player of the year. They've had so many players win defensive player of the year. I mean, from Aisha Walker to Tiffany Mitchell to Asia Wilson. Aaliyah Boston won it every year. Then Camila Cardoso won it. Raven Johnson won it this year. I think 9 players or 9 different years out of 18. You've had the Defensive Player of the Year. You've had multiple players win SEC Player of the Year. And then the last few years, you've just put together the best teams, players that were willing to sacrifice to win. That's really the true greatness of Dawn Staley, is getting all of these All-Americans, high school All-Americans, to buy into, hey, all of y'all are great individually, but the sum of our parts, the whole, can be greater if we sacrifice, if we buy in, and we play together. Hardly anybody else can do that. Maybe next week I'm going to give my take on Gino Auriemma's latest lame attempt to talk about how he absolutely made an ass of himself going off on a woman of color for kicking his teeth in the national semifinals. It was like Boss Baby. I mean, that's all I've got to say about that. Don't leave me, because I got a new outro. And enjoy this. We will be back next week. Same time, same back channel. Until then, enjoy this on the way out. Go Gamecocks, and God bless everybody. Here we go.